voice. I have no idea if music volume is good though. We're gonna find out, I guess, when people tell me make the music be quieter or something. I don't know. What are we at? 20 seconds? Alright. I think that's I think 20 seconds seems to be a good enough time for letting the stream catch up. So hello. I'm EnviroBoy, this is my channel, and we are gonna be doing some writing here. As we tend to do. Yeah. It's a nice sunny day. I'm in a good mood today. So is my cat. She's freaking out and running laps around the apartment right now. She's losing her damn mind. As she does from time to time. Doesn't help that they are doing more lawn work outside of my apartment complex, so there's all kinds of weird extra noise than what she's used to on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, so it is, what day is it? It's Tuesday. That's right, it's Tuesday. Hi there. Are you freaking out? She's totally freaking out. Cat's she's losing her damn mind, I'm telling you. Kitty. Leela, what are you doing, honey? Okay, well, whatever. We'll just let her do her thing. Sometimes I try to, like, ease her off a ledge of a complete and utter breakdown where she'll, like, sprint back and forth in the apartment for a good, like, she'll do it for a good, like, 10, 15 minutes, just, like, going back and forth. She gets really excited. It's usually if there's, like, a squirrel, because the way my apartment is set up is I have a balcony, right? Like, because I'm on the 3rd story. I've got a balcony that that extends beyond where the windows of the living room can see. So if she's at an angle trying to watch a squirrel or something, and it goes to the far side of the balcony, she runs over to one of the other rooms to try and get a view of it. And when that doesn't work, she'll run back to the living room to try and get a view. So it's like if the windows are open and she can hear a squirrel, she'll just go back and forth trying to get a good view of the squirrel. It's a good example of why, as much as we like to say how clever our pets are, they're not actually all that smart. They just don't have the reasoning capabilities that we might expect of an actually intelligent creature. Or maybe it's just my cat. Maybe my cat's just a psycho. At any rate, let's go ahead and dive ourselves into some writing here. So here's our world. I don't know, this always feels like a nice place to kind of start back up for every writing session. I think it's helpful to kind of get yourself into the mindset of, like, remembering what world we're going into. And I feel like a good visual is the easiest way to do that. So I like to just kind of start off with a visual of the map and just kind of recall exactly what my world looks like and all that kind of stuff. Also because I'm really proud of the way the map worked out when I first made it, and so I just like looking at my own handiwork from time to time. I don't think there's anything wrong with being proud of what you've accomplished in the past, and so I've accomplished a map that I like, so I like to look at it. But last time we managed to finish our basic histories for all of the major factions that are going to exist in this region. Right, so we have our Leonins, who are worshippers of the dragon, who's kind of serving as one of our potential big bad endgame bosses and all that kind of stuff. We talked about the history of the Drow up here in the forest, the Duergar in the mountainous tunnels, and the giants that live on the mountain peaks. And that gave us a pretty good... whoops, I did not mean to click that. Gave us a pretty good understanding of sort of what factions are existing in this world, and for me at least, it kind of gives me a good starting point to think about, okay, you know, what might they be trying to achieve here as factions in this world, right, in this land. So, yeah, so let's see here. What I kind of want to achieve today, you know, and I've been trying to be better about, like, when I start one of these writing streams on any given day, kind of thinking about what I want to achieve on that stream. I feel like that helps me be a bit more focused and actually a bit more productive, because I'm thinking less about like, oh, well, let's just sit down and write what we're going to write. And it gets me to be more like, all right, well, here's what we're going to try and, here's what we want to get done. So let's make sure I meter out my time properly and stay focused enough to get those things done. And then, you know, if there's time left over, great. Or if we run out of time, it still happens. It's not anything to be bummed or upset about, but it can be, I don't know, there's something that is good about occasionally expecting a certain level of, you know, accomplishment or achieving certain deliverables when writing. I think it can be helpful from time to time to do that. I mean, I think pretty much any method or approach to writing has its place, and the most helpful for any given writer can be different from day to day. But I don't know, that's kind of the mentality I've been trying to think about lately. So, what I want to achieve today is I want to think about who our sort of head honchos, grand poobahs, are going to be for our factions. And I want to try and get at least 2 of them done. We already have 1 done, right? We already have Eodris, our dragon, who's going to be the sort of faction leader of the Leonins who live among the plains here. And so I want to get at least 2 of them done. Stretch goal for the day of being maybe to try and get all 3 of them thought through and planned out and, you know, fleshed out, so we can kind of see, you know, who our leaders are. Because when we have the history of the faction, that gives us a good idea of what life is like for the faction and what the faction will maybe do from day to day. When we establish the leaders, it kind of gives us a good idea of more specific things that, like, within the context of, you know, today, the modern era, what our players are going to be experiencing, right? It gives us an idea of what the faction is trying to achieve concurrent with the players going about their business, right? Because the players will influence exactly what the factions want, and the leaders will sort of be the ones who make the decisions about what that faction is doing, right? It's like that. Just think about kind of a cult or a government in general. Whoever is the leader of that government, they kind of decide what that faction does, what that country does, what the cult does. Like, what the leader wants, the faction wants. So it's very important to have a good fleshed out leader, even if they're not going to end up being a potential, you know, big bad end game boss. You know, it can still be a very productive and important thing to kind of hammer that out. Yeah, that's what we're gonna work on today. Here's our notebook. I've got us pulled up onto our entire region page. Which, gosh, there's so much content here. Like, when I just try and scroll through all of this, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little proud of how much has already been accomplished with this campaign every time I scroll through these random encounter tables, just to see, because there's so much work involved in getting these done. So it's like, this is a substantial amount of work taken care of. So I think what I'd like to do is we could kind of look through here. So we had some sort of like campaign main goals and our side goals and stuff like that kind of thought about it. I don't want to focus too much on these, but I think it can be a good idea to look through these really quickly, see what we've already done, and that can maybe help guide us on, like, put us on the path that we're going to follow in terms of figuring any of these bosses out. So let's go ahead and start with the drow. I'm kind of curious about the drow, actually. I think that's what I want to start with. You know, I had thought maybe the Durgar, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm feeling the drow right now. And ultimately, we're gonna get multiples done, so we can do both of them. But let's think about the drow. And I think what's kind of I don't know if I want to say the word confusing, but what ends up being sort of a complicating factor for the drow is we've sort of talked about how the drow in this campaign, in this world, are going to be sort of a fractured faction, right? So we've talked about how there might be multiple drow houses, drowses, that are sort of in competition with each other, in conjunction with being in competition with the other existing factions like the Giants and the Duergar. And so what I think I want to do, you know, that's kind of a tricky one, especially if we're trying to establish who is like the ultimate leader. And so what I think I want to do is kind of start to establish a culture among the drow within this world where there's like certainly one more dominant house than the rest of them. Like one primary house, and then the others are more so offshoots, you know, or one most powerful. And I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think oftentimes it's a pretty common thing for there to be one sort of head, you know, component. When there's a fractured, you know, faction like that, there's sort of one that is the primary one, and then everyone else is just sort of an offshoot or a side branch of that group. So what I'm actually going to do for that is we're going to go to our factions here. Siski Forest Drow, right? That's who we're working with here. And so I'm going to add a little blurb in here before we actually pull up and make a page just for the leader. I want to just sort of explain that in here, so that way we have it there as a reference point. It's going to be an important thing. So let's just go ahead and say a little blurb here. We're going to go ahead and do the drow, and I'm just doing, like I always say, I'm just kind of doing a stream of consciousness type of thing right now. Just kind of blurbing it out on the page, and then if I come back to review it later, it needs editing, then we'll edit it and change it. You know, there's nothing wrong with changing work that you've already kind of put down on the page. I think it's actually a very important part of writing. You know, sort of the recognition that things can be improved, and then taking the time to do that. No writer ever writes the final draft as, like, the first draft is never the final draft. That's why they're named separate things. Everything will undergo certain amounts of, you know, editing and whatnot. So God, there are a couple fighting birds outside now. They're making a lot of racket out there. I don't know if the mic picked up any of it. So let's see here. So we're just gonna say the drow are a fractured. Actually, I want to just specify it here. The Siski Forest drow are a fractured people. Though there is a clearly dominant group within the collection of houses. We'll go ahead and stick with the term houses, like House Stark or whatever. Dominant group within the collection of houses. Disagreements among citizens about who should lead and what the race should be accomplishing has led to many offshoot houses to form. Different houses command different amounts of respect and earn varying amounts of cooperation. Cooperation. Additionally, while much infighting does occur in a political sense, where is that comma? There it is. All right. In a political sense, in a combative sense, all houses have an unspoken agreement that the survival and success of the drow is the most important thing. So it's like establishing this idea that even though they have houses, right, they have different factions or different groups within, the Siski Forest Drow as like a collective, as a race, right? There's this kind of idea that even though they have differences and will often sort of like politically spar with each other during various councils and meetings and whatnot, there's sort of this general agreement that they're all like, okay, I disagree with you on, where we should be trying to expand our influence next, but we can all agree, fuck those Duergar, right? It's like that's kind of the idea that I want to establish with this, because I want there to be a sense of cohesion. So it's like if players do want to try and spark infighting, it's not going to be quite so easy as coming in, finding one group and being like, we'll go kill those other guys for you. Like it's going to take a little bit of effort, a little bit of conniving, and just it's like they can't destroy all of them through deception just because they come in and say, to the first subgroup of drow that they meet and are like, hey, we'll help you be the more dominant one. It's like this idea, like I want it to be sort of a thing where if they did take that approach, any of the factions would look at them and be like, the fuck are you and why would we listen to you? Hey, RPG Professor, how's it going? So I just kind of want to plant that seed there with what we're talking about with these guys as we then go on to the leaders. And so there's going to be multiple leaders here for this faction. I want to think about who's going to be sort of the biggest, baddest of all of the leaders of the drow within this world, though, is kind of what I want to work on today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our foes and friends section, copy our character template, paste there. I'm going to put this up here in faction leaders because that's what we're working on. So let's see. We'll name them in a bit. Let's think about it. And this is going to be a fun exercise to try and start something completely from scratch, because I really haven't thought a whole lot about who the faction leader for the drow would be, or what his or her motives and goals and stuff would be. I haven't thought about it all that much, so we'll go ahead and kind of start this from scratch here. So thinking about how the drow came to be, right? And we can go ahead and refresh our own memories here. Let's go back actually to our factions thing for the drow. Alright, and so we've established here, so history, we've established that prior to the unhinging, prior to the calamity that caused all the chaos that exists within this world, we established that the drow didn't exist then, and came to be after the unhinging, when all of that sort of magical radiation corrupted a bunch of elves that couldn't escape from, these dangerous areas. And so I just kind of want to think about, I just kind of want to quickly check what we wrote here to make sure a timeline could be kind of consistent. Because one of the tough things is going to be thinking about, would the current leader, like one of the first things that I want to think about with this leader's history is this a leader who was one of the original drow, or are they kind of gone and different leaders have, risen and fallen over the years? And so, because that can really inform us about the nature of the drow, the nature of this leader, what their goals are going to be, all that kind of stuff. Like, that really gives us a lot of insight into who this character might be. And I really haven't thought about it a whole lot. So, looking at the things here, we have, as years passed and magic slowly subsided, elves regained the minds and senses, though corruption ran deep through both. Elves that emerged were twisted, shadow of the peaceful and wise beings they once were. They were dark in thought and desired nothing more than to spread their, wow, they're wrong new. See, like I say, we edit things as we go. Spread their new existence throughout the land, turning it to their influence and making it a world of chaos they now craved. So thinking about that, I'm gonna see here. Do they call it Drow in 5e? I tend to blank on that crap. Let's see here. Drow, they call them monsters. I don't know if they had like a race type of thing for these guys. Is what I was interested in. Dark elf Drow. Here we go. Yeah. So elf. So I just want to see what the rules as written has for Drow here, and see if there's anything that can inform. Because like always, we're talking about a homebrew world, right? So we play pretty fast and loose with the lore as it is, but I always try to inform whatever homebrew stuff I have based on the lore that's like sort of copyrighted and in existence, and I just do that as a way to make sure that it's easy for players, especially if it's players who are new to my homebrew world, as a way for them to be able to easily get a hold of whatever material exists for 5e and, you know, kind of do that and use that stuff and have their characters still be able to slide in pretty easily into my homebrew world. I don't like to make things too different that, like, when they try to create a character history, suddenly things are all wrong because the world is that different. You know, I like it to be, at most, we have to make some minor edits on a timeline or something like that. So, Darkness of the Drow. Were it not for one renowned exception, the race of Drow would be universally reviled. Tracks with what we're doing. To most, they are a race of demon-worshipping marauders dwelling in the subterranean depths of the Underdark. That's something we've changed a little bit, right? Because they originated in a forest that, like, I always try to liken the Siski Forest to being kind of a Mirkwood type of situation where it's like not inherently evil but very dark, and it tends to breed a lot of evil beings just because it provides that sort of darkness they prefer. But yeah, emerging only on the blackest nights to pillage and slaughter the surface dwellers they despise. Their society is depraved and preoccupied with the favor of Lolth, their spider goddess who sanctions murder and extermination of entire families as noble houses vie for position. We're keeping the house concept of different houses kind of vying, maybe a little less conflict, a little less open conflict going on with our iteration of them, but maybe that's something that the players could influence and breed within them by having interactions. And then, of course, it's going to talk about Drizzt, one of the more famous Drow characters that's ever existed within sort of D&D approved expanded universe lore, all that kind of stuff, until Disney eventually comes in and buys it out and makes and says it's all non-canon or whatever Disney likes to do. I'm not bitter about Star Wars. So let's see here. Drow grew up believing that surface-dwelling races are inferior, worthless except as slaves. Drow who develop a conscience or find it necessary to cooperate with members of other race find it hard to overcome that prejudice, especially when they are so often on the receiving end of hatred. So that one's kind of toned down a little bit just because the Drow are still a pretty new race. But in general, I feel like that kind of attitude is going to hold, where it's like the Drow would be willing to work with the players as outsiders, but reluctantly. Like, even when they're vying with other houses for power, it's still sort of like, I would rather work with the other houses against outside races than work with outside races against other houses, unless they can, like, really provide some strong, tangible benefits. So everything we have actually tracks pretty well. I think that it's going to be pretty easy if a player, if players are coming in with pre-existing knowledge of how Drow exist within the D&D lore. I think it's going to be pretty easy for them to, sort of sidestep and get up to speed with what we're putting into this homebrew world. So that's good. Nothing much there. The only other thing I wanted to look at, again, we're talking about age, because they just consider them a subrace of elves. We can look at the age thing here. Elves reach physical maturity about the same age as humans. The elven understanding of adulthood goes beyond physical growth and encompasses worldly experience. An elf typically claims adulthood and an adult name around the age of 100 and can live to be about 750 years old. So, that's going to be helpful for us to think about. And I think I'm going to just go ahead and adhere to that rules as written, just because, again, when unless I have something very specific in mind about my homebrew world here that we're working on, I like to try and keep things kind of consistent, because I do want the homebrew world to be something that is accessible and usable for any D&D game with any group. Yeah, what do you got? Been working on campaign for 4 years. I don't know if I ever thought to put it in one note. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've done world building for the better part of a decade as a hobby, and I've only really adopted OneNote within the past like maybe 2 years. And it's been a game changer. It's been a game changer. Start like understanding how I can use like notebooks and tabs and stuff to organize things. It's made it so much easier for me to keep things cohesive. And it's for two reasons. One, because of the tabbing system, right? It's so easy to keep things organized but still searchable and like browsable. But the other thing about it is you can, so if we're going into our foes and friends here, right? We're gonna make this character. Once it's done and I have it titled properly, you can do the copy link to page. You can copy the link to the page and then like paste it in the faction. I could paste it down there. So that way if I'm reading, if I can't remember the name of one of the leaders that I already wrote for the drow, and I'm like, oh shoot, but I want to use them elsewhere in this, I want to use them again, I can come in here and just click on it, and it will take me to my own page within my own notebook. And it's one of the most helpful things. And so it's like, yeah, it is. It's absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite aspects of this. It's hard to do until you're kind of towards the final draft of anything you're writing, because it automatically has the title to whatever this is, and so even though it'll link to the page, the title will not keep up. So it's like, I want to wait until I've at least named the character, and it's going to be the final draft of the name. But you can do stuff like that, and that to me is kind of the biggest part about it, is you can basically structure it so it's like a wiki page, right, that has direct links that bounce between the different pages as you need them. And so it makes following your own notes so much quicker and easier that way. And so I'm a huge advocate for it, 100%. It's a pain when you've got a whole bunch of stuff to transfer over. But usually what I recommend in that situation is start your notebook, kind of organize it how you think might be helpful, and then as you pull up old documents as you need them, just whenever you pull out an old Word document or whatever you're keeping it as, whenever you pull it up, take the time to transfer that one over into your OneNote. And then don't don't make it a project to like, oh, I'm going to transfer everything over right now. Don't make that a project. Instead, just like as you use them, pull up that one thing, pull it over into the OneNote, and slowly rebuild your OneNote notebook, and do it that way. Is what that's how I would recommend going about it, because it can be a very daunting project to try and just like transfer everything you've already made over. And daunting and discouraging. So that would be my recommendation. But yes, I do highly recommend OneNote in general. I love using OneNote. And I have yet to find any other tool or system. I've tried a few others, but I've yet to find one that feels as intuitive and functional to me as OneNote. Even though OneNote has some imperfections, it generally ends up being the best option. So, alright, so let's think about our drow. So, the unhinging occurred somewhere in the vicinity of 2,000 years ago. And the drow, when I'm thinking about the timeline, right? So, like, the drow as a race were sort of corrupted elves right when the unhinging happened. So, in terms of drow existing, the leader of, like, the most powerful of the houses or whatever isn't going to be an original drow. But what's a bit more complicated is thinking about, because the way the history's kind of been written, and what I've kind of got in my head for it, is that the original drow didn't really organize themselves. It was like maybe a generation or two after the originals that like were sort of the first ones to organize themselves. Because what happened with the unhinging, right, is this big explosion of chaos in the world that threw everything out of whack and lasted probably a couple hundred years, and then things like after that slowly started to settle down, right? And it's as things were settling down that the Drow kind of calmed down from their intense extreme psychosis, right? Because that's what it was. It's basically just this psychosis that happened from magical radiation during the unhinging that corrupted elves that couldn't escape to a safer location. That's what their origin is. But as that magical radiation was originally very, very intense, it kind of forced them to go beyond just being dark and mean and evil and corrupted. They were like flat out animalistic, just absolutely insane, fighting and killing each other on sight, that kind of situation. And then as things calmed down, they stopped killing each other immediately, and instead would like maybe have small collectives of like, a handful that would just kind of band together and form a tribe of sorts. And then after that, a couple, a generation or two after that is when they started to actually sort of like organize themselves into identifiable houses, like houses, like again, like the House Stark, House whatever, House Blada-Blue. And so when I think about that kind of timeline, it seems to me like this leader is probably going to be fairly young and not one of the original Drow. Definitely not one of the original Drow. None of them would really be alive at this point in time. Like I said, we're probably a couple generations deep. So we're because we're talking about if it happened 2,000 years ago and they didn't really start organizing themselves into houses like 1,000 years ago, we're probably talking about, like I say, I imagine they would be kind of young, because the idea of houses and collective goals for the entire Drow race is still pretty new. It's like, it's new thoughts. This isn't, the old way, there really isn't an old way. So the old ones are just kind of along for the ride as they slowly grow more and more senile. It's the young ones who are like, no, we can achieve more. We want to do more. So when I'm thinking about this guy, history, like I'm thinking that this one is going to be somewhere around like the 300 or 400 year old mark, which for an elf is like middle aged, right? That's like that, like for an elf, it's like basically when you think about an elf lifespan, just divide it by 100 and you've got the roughly, or rather divide it by 10 and you've got roughly the human age equivalent, right? So it's like if we got a 400-year-old elf, that's like a 40-year-old person, and so it's like, as far as like political power goes, that's pretty young, but it's still old enough to, have some respect, be taken seriously in your ideas, have people follow you as a leader. So I feel like that's about the age that we're going to stick with. Yeah, I want to do that. But okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to change my mind just because it's easier to write about it. We're going to go ahead and name this person. I haven't even decided if it's going to be a man or a woman who's in charge of this house. Fantasy. We're going to go to my favorite name thing. We're just using fantasy name generators. I love this tool. Highly recommend to anyone looking for a way to come up with names for their homebrew stuff. Highly recommend, because there are so many things, and I love the fact that it sort of takes it takes like, just like language and dialect characteristics and makes up names oftentimes, right? And I really like that. It adds that extra little fantasy twist to it. Kind of like how with Game of Thrones, it's not Jeffrey, it's Joffrey. And it's not like, it's not like Brandon, it's Bran or whatever, or whatever. Like, just doing the names like that where there's just like a bit of a twist, but they still kind of conform to that like old English nomenclature conventions. And so this website does a beautiful job of it. I love this website. Huge fan of it. So let's think here. We can go ahead and just do, if we do this, do they have like just a drow or a dark elf Dark elf names. Look at that. Let's just do it. Let's just go ahead and stick with dark elf names. I think that's great. And I'm gonna do neutral names. I'm gonna like avoid selecting a sex for this character until like the last second here. This is not Donjon, but I have used Donjon quite a bit. I do enjoy Donjon as well. I always pronounce it Donjon, which I know isn't actually how it's pronounced, but to me that's just like, that's how I do it. No, this is Fantasy Name Generators. That's literally the name of the website. Big fan of this one, but Donjon is also one of my favorite tools. I use that as a starting point. I use that one as a starting point when I'm making a dungeon. I'll use that as a starting point, as like a framework for like a map and stuff, and then I'll edit from there, is usually my approach to making dungeons. So I love that one too. Highly recommend. Alright. I immediately love this first name, Kokri, because it's very close to Corky, and I think that'd be a hilarious name for someone who's like ahead of the house. But, Zoik, look at this one. This one's like, so many of these names are so close to being goofy sounds. Zoikness, almost like Zoinks. I don't know. Maybe it's only my brain that does that. Drunvis. Ooh. I like this one. I like Kirala. Kirala. Let's start with Kirala. We're gonna give a last name. You know we are. But let's just put down Kirala. Look at that. We don't even have to delete the whole thing. The epitome of laziness. I didn't even have to completely start and type in the CH. That right there. That's a win. Alright, I want to find... Thorano isn't bad. Let's remember... yeah, exactly, RPG. Like, I'm 100% with you. The Zonkness... Like, it 100% reminds me of Scooby-Doo. Like, I immediately was like, oh, is that House Shaggy? I'm with you 100%. I want a last name that sounds very grand. Sounds very... For all... Like, I want a last name that sounds, like, super bougie. Like, that someone would say when they would really extend the vowel sounds. Add a lot of the ow noise. Because that allows for the inflection of superiority. Like, that's kind of what I want. So Thorano isn't bad, right? That's an okay one. I'm gonna put that down, but I wanna cycle through a couple more. I wanna cycle through a couple more before we settle on it, because I want this to be just as snooty as possible. Undreen isn't bad. Ooh, Chundrur. Erses. That has almost like a... That almost has like an Egyptian twist to it, you know. Erses, I like that one. Deesruth, who's Ruth? Deesruth. Undeduth, Zeustra, Cubano, Vugnogish. That sounds Russian. Vugnogish. Mudu, Pomron. Domrur isn't bad. Senia. Oh, Das True. Das True. God damn it. See, even I, like, I can't get mad at my players whenever they make fun of names, because I do the same damn thing. Wevno, Vevnis, Noonvrosh, Druzru. I don't know. I'm growing more and more fond of Thorano. I think Thorano sounds good. Chirano Thorano. And I think it sounds like a woman. I think she sounds like a matriarchal head of house, is what I'm thinking of. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds very... And, like, I'm immediately getting a very Lady D vibe. Very grand and elegant and proud. Like, and sort of walks that line of being, you know, very proper and elegant, but extremely intimidating and frightening. When I'm done with my campaign, am I going to put it on Roll20? I actually don't use Roll20 for my groups anymore. I make most of my stuff to be able to use Foundry. But what I'm planning on doing, if you're wondering more about, like, so that other people can use it, my plan is to, one of these days, whenever I find I actually have time in my life to figure out how this works and kind of create a separate notebook to do it, I want to figure out how I can share and just make publicly available the OneNote notebook. Like, I want to take just this stuff, because my OneNote notebook that I use, I'm using it for my entire world, right? So I don't want to share my entire world, if for no other reason, so that way my players can't be buttheads and get the stuff beforehand and have the source material. But I do want to try and find a way to make it easy for other people to have access to this particular campaign via a OneNote notebook. So a OneNote notebook, So it's in the works. It's going to happen. But since I do this all for free, it tends to be kind of a lower priority for me to figure out those types of things. So it will happen one day. But no promises on when that day will will happen. It's an intent of mine, in conjunction with also the templates that I've made for all of these different types of things. I do want to make those available because I've had a lot of people ask about my templates for, filling out and writing a dungeon or writing a city or a character and all that kind of stuff. Because you can see this is one of them, right? I use templates to make sure I remember for my own purposes what I want to have created and written down for any given character, any given dungeon, a nation, whatever. So one of these days I will make it available, but I don't know. Whenever life stops being busy for a minute is when I'll do it, and let me tell you, that just does not look like it's gonna happen at least until the summer's over. Life is so busy. Life is so busy for me right now. So hey, Gift of Gabby, how's it going? But I promise it will happen eventually. I make no promises about when that will be. Yeah, so that's there. One of these days. So we have Tirana Thorano is going to be our faction leader for our drow here. So let's just give her a bit of history here. And what I'm imagining with her is that, again, like, I'm just immediately getting a very Lady D vibe out of, like, what my brain is kind of conjuring up for this character here. Like, I've got that image in my head of just sort of this extremely imposing woman who, like, no one in their right mind would fuck with, right? Like, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. But, like, this like intimidating, scary being that's hidden behind an outward expression of, like, elegance and stuff. All right, Professor. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your encouragement. You know I don't give up. One of my mottos is you don't even have to believe in yourself. You just have to try. That's how I live my life. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Oh, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. I really appreciate that. Your support means a lot to me. It's so it makes it fun to stream and everything. So I really appreciate it. Let's see here. Gabby, I can only assume that you're saying your head is spinning, which would make sense given that I'm not sure I'm following what you typed there. But you don't. I never require anyone be head is spinning. Yeah, no, I gather that. No, you do never. No one ever has to feel obligated to participate in chat. Lurkers are 100% welcome as chat participants. If you're just here for I always liken my writing to being like a writing and maybe occasionally a bit more brash version of, like, Bob Ross. It's like he never requires that you participate or even try to paint along. He's just happy that you're here to listen, and that's my attitude as well. Even if you don't participate, that's fine. I'm just happy that you're here and gaining some entertainment from me and whatever weird nonsense I'm working on. Never feel pressure to participate, never at all. So let's see here. For this woman here, I kind of imagine her. So I'm thinking about how she would rise to power, right? So I kind of want to talk about just briefly her childhood, because I kind of imagine her rise to power would begin as a young adult, and until then it was kind of just her learning and surviving, right? So I kind of want to say, let's just kind of say something kind of vague about her early life. Shirala Thorano was born to a small family, to a small drow. Let's do this drow family of roughly, let's just say 20 individuals. The concept of organized houses was still new and widely unaccepted is what I'm trying to say. Unaccepted. Let's see. The concept of organized houses was still new and widely unaccepted among the drow during her childhood. But even as a youngster, Shirala saw opportunity in such structured ways. Let's see here. She spent her let's say early years simply observing and learning, not just from her family, but from all drow she encountered as her family lived nomadic lives within the Siski forest. So this doesn't exactly jive with what I had originally been thinking, but as I always say, when I'm writing something, I always like to just kind of take the stream of consciousness approach. I just kind of just spew out whatever my brain is thinking. I put it on the page, and then we edit it later. And so, because originally I was thinking, like, the other houses are splinter groups of the original house, but now I'm kind of thinking it might be the opposite. I'm thinking it might be kind of the opposite, where you have a bunch of small houses that are doing a lot of infighting, and maybe Shirala with House Thorano, right? So she's the matriarch, she's the leader of this house, she's the one who's organized all of this. Maybe instead of her being a splinter group or something, instead she's like a unifying force. And so she's pulling together a lot of smaller houses and a lot of singular families and stuff like that within the drow of the forest, and she's kind of building up that first empire that's maybe abandoning that aggressive group, right? Because that would almost make more sense too when we're thinking about describing kind of how the drow as people have existed, where they as individuals were just sort of this barbaric group of monsters, right? Corrupted elves that would fight and kill each other on sight and have slowly become more refined. And so it's like the idea that she would organize them almost fits better with that idea. So I think I'm gonna let this chain of thought keep going here, even though it's different than what I was originally saying. Spent her early years simply observing and learning. As a young adult, Shirala had already begun planting seeds of her leadership among the other, let's say the other young drow of the forest. Where she could, she would let's say avoid and prevent conflict, choosing instead to foster alliances. In this way, she built a family of loyal, what do I want to say? It's not really subjects at this point. Of loyal companions, maybe? No, not quite companions. Of loyal, I guess maybe colleagues? It's not exactly what the right word, but I think it's the closest I can think of right now. In this way, she built a family of loyal colleagues who could agree to work together for larger and loftier goals. Let's see here. Let's actually say let's say this loyalty grew with her until the time was right for her to declare herself a leader of how am I gonna describe this? So the time was right for her to declare herself a leader of what would become the most prominent house among the Drow societies. And then here's where we can go ahead and plant the name for dramatic effect. Boom. House Thorano. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom. There it is. I think one of these days I would learn that these coasters that I have are some of the biggest culprits of the whole suction cup to the bottom of the cup effect, where you lift up your cup and the condensation makes the coaster come up 3 inches and then come crashing down into the desk, startling me. Like without fail, it happens at least once per day. You'd think I would learn, but I just can't seem to catch on. And I don't know what my problem is. I know what my problem is. My problem is I have shitty coasters. That's what my problem is. Sorry. Got a little heated there. House Thorano. Okay, so. At first, many families and houses scoffed at the proposed size. Well, I don't know about proposed sized. Scoffed at the superior attitudes of House Thorano and its members. Let's see here. Let's see, what do you got? If Disney princesses were D&D classes, Cinderella would be a warlock. She gets her power from Fae. Okay. Yeah, that tracks. That tracks. I can buy that. I can buy that. But she certainly didn't study it, right? So she wouldn't be a sorcerer. So yeah, no, I'm on board with that. I'm on board with that. I like that. I like that. All right, let's see. At first, many families and houses scoffed at the superior attitudes House Thorano and its members, but it became, swiftly became apparent that this superiority was not just bravado. Oh wait, bravado? Is that it? It's not just bravado. Chirala as time went on, Chirala's cunning and fierce attitude, cunning and fierce, let's say personality actually, proved effective not only at building up her house, but okay, I'm not gonna go back and retype it. Building, cunning and fierce personality proved effective not only building up her house, but at undermining those who would defy her. So Ariel is an artificer. Oh yeah, 100% with all the gadgets and shit. Absolutely, 100%. Aladdin is our rogue with a pet. Yeah, that's fair. Although I don't know if I would count Aladdin as a princess. But that's fair. That's fair. No, he would be. You could call him a rogue. With a. Yeah, with like an animal companion. That makes the most sense. Like the animal might make people think that he's like a druid or a ranger, but no, you're right. He's definitely a thief. He's a rogue. Let's see here. Undermining those who would defy her. In time. Let's see here. In time, other drow families saw the benefits of Chirala's form of organization among the drow and understood that the only way to maintain their own autonomous power was to build a house that would cooperate with House Thorano on large matters. Large matters that concerned the drow as a whole. Let's see here. We'll say in present times. 1P for that. Present times, House Thorano remains the most powerful and noted house among the drow. Chirala allows other houses to exist for now as peace serves her grander visions well, but in her mind, such allowances are temporary. As she sees it, one day all houses will unite under her as one singular drow race that will conquest throughout the land, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. Boom. There we go. Okay, it's very clumsy. It's not super narrative, but it gives us what we need. Yeah, Aladdin took a feat to gain a familiar. 100%. 100%. That's the only explanation, truthfully. Alright, so there's kind of a history there. I'm not super proud of this history. It feels clunky. It's not very narrative. I usually like to have it be a bit more, read a bit more like a short fairy tale or an old wives' tale or something like that. But it'll serve for now, and we can edit it later as needed. The important part is that it establishes her as being sort of the most prominent of the drow, so that for the sake of a campaign, we can have a convenient figurehead that serves as like the big, you know, our big grand poobah of the drow society for our players to sort of fixate on, because definitely something that players like to do is players don't like to earn their way up to, you know, the most powerful individual of any given society or city or whatever. They like to immediately be like, all right, we need to talk to the king, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, if you wanted to go ultra realistic, you would have to shut that down pretty quick and be like, no. You guys don't get to just automatically have an audience with the king. You're a bunch of nobodies, right? Like, realistically, that's what it would be. But for the sake of progressing campaigns and stuff, I find it much easier to just go ahead and let players indulge in their visions of grandeur, unless they're, like, really going out of their way to be buttheads about it. And sometimes I'll stop them just to spite them. But at any rate, they're eventually going to want that figurehead to fix on, either as a friend or an enemy. And so this gives us, even though we're kind of establishing the idea that the Drow have a lot of infighting, and that'll give us a lot of our sort of like side quest aspects of things. So even though we've established that, this gives us sort of like a figurehead for them to fixate on, and recognize that anyone else, you know, will probably end up creating heads of house for multiple different Drow houses to give them options in terms of, you know, do we want to be in alliance, or do we want to be in conflict? Do we want to sow discord among all of the different Drow houses, you know, for our own benefits, yada yada yada. You know, that gives us a whole lot of options for that. But we do want a singular figurehead, especially if it's going to be a potential big bad situation with the Drow leadership. So that kind of establishes that. So thinking about motivations here, what we've kind of established here is that Shirala has something bigger than the Siski Forest in mind, and I think that's excellent. So Shirala, and we can actually say it like that. Just say it like that, exactly. Shirala has visions that expand far beyond the boundaries of the Siski Forest. In her mind, the entire world beyond the tree line is ripe for the taking to anyone who has the strength and confidence to do so. She wants to rule the world, not a measly house confined to a single forest. Let's see here. But that doesn't mean she how do I want to say this? Doesn't mean she is, let's say, lacking in cunning or patience. Through observation and practice early in life, she understands that often smaller steps that on the surface conflict with situations that she understands that often smaller steps that on the surface conflict with larger goals can be valuable stepping stones along the path. Boom, there we go. It's kind of poetic too. It keeps using the path and steps metaphor there. I see what I did there. Not to toot my own horn, but beat. So, okay. Her more immediate vision Oopsie. Vision is wowee is of taking control of the vast underground network of dwarven tunnels currently controlled by the Duergar of the High Doom Mountains. Right, so we talked about how there's the Duergar in those High Doom Mountains, right, and they're doing their own thing. And so she sees that as a valuable tool, you know, as a good place to conquest. Easily defensible and with reach as long as the mountain range that spans and far south across the land. It is the perfect stronghold to stage a crusade that moves in all directions. She wants those tunnels and will engage in any treachery necessary to gain them. Even going so far as to consider establishing alliances with the giants that live among the mountain peaks. Boom, there we go. Okay, so there we go. So there we've kind of established her goals there, and I think that's pretty good. That gives us an idea of what she's trying to accomplish at any given time here, you know. And it's like I always say, it's better to write a character background than it is to write a script for an NPC, right? Especially when we're talking about an NPC that the players can interact with and will likely interact with multiple times. If you try and script everything, it's going to be very hard to keep up with the fact that players don't know the script, and they're not always going to say the right thing. But if you give the characters, the factions, the leaders, the NPCs, if you give them all personalities, it's much easier to just sort of ad-lib on the fly as necessary to have them respond to whatever the players end up doing throughout the game. So by giving sort of this goal and understanding that in the long run she wants conquest, in the short term she wants those tunnels, that gives us an idea of how she'll react to things. So if players recommend something that will help her gain those tunnels, it'll be easier to win her favor. Or if they don't do that, she may be able to then suggest that and sort of like either plainly or deceptively try to have players help her in achieving that, which will, you know, so when it comes to trying to make deals and political moves and stuff like that, it gives us an idea of what she would do. And it becomes a lot easier to, like I say, just sort of ad-lib and make things up on the fly as is made necessary by players in their chaotic way of playing that always ends up shining through, no matter how experienced or determined to be sane your players are. So I think that's all we need right now for that. So now the last thing that we're going to do right now is our role-playing notes. Stat blocks I'm going to hold off on for right now because I haven't decided at this moment if I'm going to just reskin and repurpose existing monsters that have stat blocks within, you know, the D&D lore as it is, because that's one of my go-to methods for creating particularly like Debbie bosses and stuff, is reskinning an enemy that's the right challenge rating and has the right move set to what I want that character to be capable of doing. I'll usually find that to be the easiest way, but sometimes, especially for a big bad, sometimes I'll take the time to kind of create a character sheet and just balance their level as necessary for what the expected player levels and stuff are going to be. Oh my goodness, excuse me, I apologize. So I'm not going to worry about that quite yet, because I still haven't really decided on that one. And that's not really, and that wasn't on the sort of like checklist of what I wanted to get done today. What I wanted to get done today was 2 of these sort of details, or the details down for 2 faction leaders, right? So we're almost done with one of them too, which is good. We're making really good time. So let's see here. So the accent right here. So what I always do, this is a very, if you want to have like a consistency among, as a DM, among your sessions and your characters, I find it very helpful to just have these role-playing notes things, and this will get edited a lot as I'm playing, because I might, excuse me, I am so sorry. Oh my gosh, apparently I need a siesta here. But a lot of times, if there's a recurring NPC, I want to offer up that sort of consistency so players can kind of grow more attached to that NPC, which can be a valuable thing if they're looking for allies or looking for information, right? If you want to have the game be realistic, you want to make them care and like the NPCs to a degree. So, to do that, I keep some basic role-playing notes that can be edited quite a bit, so that way, again, I maintain that consistency. So accent, what I'm doing here is, it's not going to be so much an accent as a tone of voice, but basically all I'm going to write here, Kirala here, Chirala. Chirala is essentially a drow version of Lady D. She has a low, booming voice that commands attention, and speaks, and let's see here, and enunciates, oh no, it's enunciates, is that right? Yeah, there it is. And enunciates her words to elevate the sense of grandeur. Grandeur, is that it? Yeah. Sense of grandeur that she exudes. There we go. That's flowery language right there. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, so that's her accent and her alignment. I'm gonna put her as a lawful evil, is what I am getting the sense of what her alignment is gonna be here. Lawful evil. She follows. I want to say, like, it's not. I mean, she's evil, and she's fine with like breaking laws and stuff like that. It's more so she follows societal rules of speech and interaction, but always as a means of pulling strings to get what she wants. ... which is world domination. Boom. So that just kind of gives us an idea. She's lawful evil. So it's like she's not going to do anything irrationally. She's very measured, very careful. She plans very detailed and okay, I don't know, that sentence fell apart as I was saying it. She's very detailed and meticulous in her planning. That's what I'm trying to say here. But the fact is, she wants world domination. She doesn't care who she has to crush in order to achieve it. So that's where the evil comes in. Like, she's fine with backstabbing people, but she's going to do it in the most, like, old time rules of engagement type of ways, right? That's what her way is going to be. And so nature is a little less about her alignment and more about, like, her personality again. So it's like lawful evil, the alignment is more about, what make her, what factions make her lawful evil, what character traits make her lawful evil. And then nature's going to be more about, you know, like what else is there to her to inform what kind of character she is. So Chirala is an extremely patient individual. She can maintain cordial attitudes indefinitely as needed. And almost never acts on impulse. But make no mistake, she always has layers of plan and deception behind everything she says and does. Her motivations are incomprehensible to everyone except for herself. She will always make sure that she receives more from you than you do of her, and she and she is all too happy to stab you in the back. She's gonna stab you. To stab you in the back. She's all too happy to stab you in the back the second it becomes profitable to do so. I think that's a really important part of her sort of character and role-playing notes. It's like just sort of, because the thing about it is, as a DM, as a DM, I'm not actually particularly good at doing the whole like layers of deception type of thing. That's because I'm not that kind of person in general. It's hard for me to also roleplay that, right? It's hard for me to roleplay as if I know what the players are gonna do, even though oftentimes one of the most commonly used tropes of media and art is someone who is able to know, like, three actions down the line what people's actions and reactions are going to be like, right? And so it's like for a character that's beneficial, but for me trying to play that character, it's hard to, because essentially we're creating a character that is just impossibly smarter than me, just like crazy levels of smarter than me. So it's like, how do you roleplay someone who's smarter than you? Well, that's where our role-playing notes and our nature comes into play, because as long as we know that she's willing to do that, you can add that sort of sense of deception, right? You can just sort of add that sense of like, you can kind of hint at that and be like, so if someone's all like, okay, if you give us this land, then we'll give you this land. And her attitude, even if I don't really know how that benefits her more than the other player, I can just have her kind of, you can roleplay her as like giving a smirk and be like, all right, that sounds like a deal to me, right? And you kind of just add that little bit of mirth to it that makes them wonder, like, oh, does this character know something more than my character does? And then you figure out what more they know later on, right? So once like players are trying to achieve something, or once they want to find something later on, it's like, oh, it turns out it was in that thing that you gave her, and she knew that all along, and so she's going to toy with you, right? So it's like you use little tricks like that, and that's where understanding her personality is so helpful, because it'll allow me to drop those hints without actually having to, in the moment, know better than I do. Because as I say, I am, like, in any given situation, even though I'm the one who writes the puzzles, right, and the one who wrote the answer to it, there are many situations where I will present traps and puzzles that my players are smarter than me about, and it's like, well, shoot, how do I outsmart them with this? Even though I'm the one who planned it, I feel like I'm the one who's getting outwitted here, and so it's like, how do you handle that situation? And that's this is one of the important tools for it. I need to really quickly do something here. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So yeah, and so then the stat blocks and character sheets, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just delete this, so that way I know that's still empty. And we will fill that out later. We'll get to that at a later date once I decide exactly how I want to do this. I'm probably going to lean towards just using a pre-made monster that has the right, you know, challenge rating and stuff like that, because then I can just find, you know, a specific, a specific, you know, pre-made character, or maybe even a boss from a pre-made module that I can just reskin. That'll serve my purposes. Hey, Garvital. Hey, how's it going? Glad to see you here. Yeah, we're doing some world writing. That says, I've been working, it's an on-stream project of writing an entire campaign for D&D within my homebrew world, using it as a sort of a fun way to share and discuss ideas with viewers, as well as offer instructions to those who are new to DMing or new to world building, that are looking for tips and suggestions on how to get started or how to do this, that, or the other part of it. So it's just, it's like I've likened it. I've used the reference a couple times this stream, but I do it all the time. It's like a world building. I strive for a world building version of Bob Ross, where it's like we'll just go through the process, we'll talk about it, and in the end we'll have a very nice final product. Only we are not going to have a campaign by the end of this. This is like an ongoing project that's going to take months of streams to do, because writing a campaign is a complex thing and there's a lot of steps to it. But yeah, so that's what we're working on here. Nice. Yeah, working on your own campaign and everything. Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of people like that. And it's really fun to share ideas. I love hearing, you know, the other ideas of what other people are working on. I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. It's so much fun because there's so many people that have so many good ideas, you know, and it's like I love hearing the other ideas because people will come up with ideas that I would have never even fathomed. And I'm sure the opposite is true as well, where I'll sit here and I'll start writing something that other people are like, whoa, I would have never thought about that. And it's just, I'm a firm believer that sharing ideas makes better DMs and better world builders, and god damn it, we need more of those. So that way one day, maybe one day, I can actually be a player again rather than being the forever DM. We can hope. So welcome. So yeah, what we're working on, what I'm just finishing up right now is, so we've got our world, we've kind of made our map, and we've come up with some factions for it, and we're working on the leaders for the factions. Yeah, no, glad. Oh my goodness, Brzinger. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't even know if it's meant to be pronounced properly. But yeah, no, absolutely. I always say too, like I say, I don't never ever feel expected to participate. If you're just here to listen and get ideas, then god damn it, I'm happy you're here too. You know, I think it's awesome that people are interested in this stuff. I think it's great. I think it's great fun, and I love knowing that other people are as into it as I am. So, okay, so we've got our faction leader for our drow within this world. So, and we've got about a half hour left in the writing stream for today. So I think that gives us enough time to think about some leaders. I kind of want to do the Duergar leader, because I feel like our Duergar in general are going to be much more one-dimensional in terms of how their society is structured than the drow. So I feel like it's going to be a bit easier to think about how a drow king comes to be and what his motivations are and all that kind of stuff, right? Because the drow, if we're establishing there's like this complex political game of there being separate drow houses, but there's one that's more dominant and all that kind of stuff. You know, like like that adds complexity to the drow. It makes it a bit more challenging to think about, okay, well, what's going to be the big bad, you know, the potential big bad of players wanting to take down the drow if that's what they decide they want to do in this campaign. You know, with the Duergar, it's a lot easier because it's like, well, if there's just one king and there's not really a whole lot of political dealings going on, it's like there's a very straight pathway to accomplishing that. So I think let's tackle that a little bit and see what kind of progress we can make on a drow king here. So we're gonna stick in our foes and friends section here, going to copy our character template, paste it, move it up into our faction leaders thing here. And so character template here. Let's first off, let's just go ahead and come up with a Duergar name. So we've got our fantasy name generator tool, which, as I've said earlier in the stream, one of my favorite tools. I love this tool. So many different options, no matter what kind of name you're coming up with, whether you want to have some sort of like real world nationality type of sound or feel to it, whether you want like a fantasy race in specific, there's like a type of monster, whatever type of name you can think of, it's there. City names, people names, cave names, ocean names, whatever, it's here. This is like a one-stop shop, man. This is like the department store of naming things, and I love it. So let's see what kind of, let's see if they've got like they've got dwarf names. Do they have like a Duergar, dark elf, death worm names, demon detective, dragon names, dragonkin, dryad. I feel like just doing dwarf names would probably be about right for the Duergar, because they really are just corrupted dwarves. So I feel like that would work pretty well. So let's just do that. Let's find a good king name. This one we're gonna stick with. I get the sense in my brain the Duergar king is a king, not a queen. I mean, maybe he's a queen, maybe he slays. I don't know. We'll get to that part of it. But right now, we're just talking about it's a man, and he's all angry about life, as Duergar are. Or Oromik. Ooh, I kind of like that name. Oromik. King Oromik. Mag Max. This is like Mad Max. I kind of like that. Leatherborn, Cave Coat, Dusk Buckle, Mithril Horn, Onyx Shoulder. Ooh, I like Onyx Shoulder. I think that sounds like the type of imposing name that a king of the Duergar would want. Oromik Onyx Shoulder. I don't know. I guess that doesn't flow very well. I'm gonna stick with Oromik. I like that name for a first name here. Oromik. Was it CK? Yeah. Oromik. Let's see what else we've got. Dimto. Ooh, Nightbrand. Oromik Nightbrand. King Nightbrand. I like that. I like that a lot. Nightbrand. Let's do it. Let's do that. Because ultimately it doesn't matter. We're just making up a name. So, whatever. Alright, so there we go. So let's talk about the history of this guy here. So when I'm thinking about how one becomes a Duergar king, I feel like knowing the Duergar, and so what we've established for the Duergar is really they're just obsessed with gold, treasure, wealth, and power. They're trying to establish themselves as just the most unquestioningly powerful beings that could possibly live under the mountains. Like, they're corrupted dwarves, and so they basically want to reclaim the dwarven tunnels that were sort of damaged and abandoned during the unhinging. They want to reclaim that, but not only do they want to reclaim that, they want to establish themselves as being the most powerful beings under the mountain, and they want to be an unmovable force. They want to keep that dominion, and they want nothing to be able to hold a candle to them. They don't ever want to have that dominance shaken. So with that idea, I feel like a king, I feel like the first king would have been the one who was the best at getting results in terms of reclaiming the tunnels. And then from there, I get the sense that it would just be like sort of that divine right thing, where it's like he has running through him the blood, running through his veins is the blood of the original, reclaimer, and it's like, and that reclaimer maybe had magical powers, right? And so like he's got the blood of that ancestry running through him at this point in time. Is kind of what I imagine. So Oromik Nightbrand is the inheritor of the throne of the High Doom Duergar. His grandfather. Let's see here. His grandfather. Well, actually, let's just say his ancestor, many generations before him, rose to prominence due to his strength. Prominence. Due to his strength and ability to lead the Duergar on their conquest to reclaim and control of the ancient and abandoned dwarven tunnels. In his day, this ancestor, and one of these days, we may flesh out that ancestor and add some history to it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it blank because I like to try and stay focused on just one thing at a time. I talk about that a lot, where it's like, write notes to yourself, maybe highlight things. Maybe what I'll do here is I'll say, what we'll do, just to give myself a reminder, we'll do like a highlight, and maybe we'll just do it like in brackets, own story, put a question mark there, right? And we'll highlight that. So it's like, maybe one day I will go ahead and flesh that out, but for right now, that's not my priority. So we make a note of it to remind myself later, but for now, we're moving on, right? It's one thing that I know from hearing from other people who are just sort of getting into home brewing, world building, and all that kind of stuff. I hear a lot that they feel overwhelmed by the amount of stuff to make, and one of the best ways to do that is to not worry about all the stuff you have to make. Worry about what you're making right here, right now. And then because there's always the next time you sit down to write to add that other detail. So just make notes of other things you think of to write, and then we'll tackle that later. But for now, so in his day, this ancestor was unmatched in his, whoopsie, it's still highlighting. I don't want it to do that. Oh shoot, dang it. Unhighlight, no color. Dang it, that one too. No color, dang you. Why is it still highlighting that? Fine, we'll just backspace it. How's that? How do you like that? One note, clumsy thing. All right, was unmatched in his strength and knowledge of the dark magics that the Duergar are obsessed with. As time has passed, the Duergar people have accepted the idea of divine right to lead, passing through the bloodline. Passing through the bloodline, trusting that the bearer of the ancestors' blood is the bearer of the ancestors' power. Boom. There we go. Let's see here. For his part, Orimic has demonstrated his ability to live up to such. Wow, this P key. One of these days I'm gonna actually fix it rather than saying that I need to fix it like I do every single time I sit down and write on this keyboard. For his part, Orimic has demonstrated his ability to live up to such grand expectations. He has won many fights single-handedly and has, in his time, greatly expanded expanded the territory in which the Duergar make their homes. through reclaimed dwarven treasures, the wealth and power of the Duergar people people has grown immensely. You can tell it's getting towards the end of the writing stream here because my fingers are getting tired. They're not as dexterous as they usually are. just like 20 more minutes, fingers. Hang on. Through reclaimed dwarven treasures and the wealth and power of the Duergar people has grown immensely, and the twisted Duergar people couldn't be happier. There are rumors even of the quest to reclaim the dwarven tunnels. Rumors even of the quest to reclaim the dwarven tunnels being complete within Ormic's rule, and further rumors of his intentions to then begin expansion of their own beyond even what there is to find in the mountains. Mountains already. I don't really like that sentence, but I'm just going to move on past it. Like I always say, stream of consciousness, will edit it as it becomes necessary later on. But right now we're just trying to get stuff on the paper. Because if you get too hung up on trying to make it perfect the minute you write it down, that's a really good way to halt your progress and kind of run out of steam very quickly. So I always recommend just stream of consciousness, get down what you can, and then edit it when it becomes necessary. Because it may not even be necessary to edit any of this in the future. It may be that this blurb and this background is enough, and I never really need to waste time trying to make it absolutely perfect. Because we're not writing a novel right here, though I like to add a narrative flair to the things that I write in this notebook. We're not writing a novel. We're making a campaign, which means we're basically just trying to make sure that we put down the information that a DM might need for the sake of providing a rich and interactive world for players. So with that in mind, I'm not going to worry about editing too much right here, right now. And honestly, as far as history goes, I think that's all we need. Like, we've established where he got his power from. Just divine right, passed it down from generation to generation. And people respect him and appreciate his rule. Like, he's done well, so people like him and they respect him. Kind of gives us what we need there. So motivations. So for all the praise of being a strong and effective leader, Ormic has very limited visions of what the Duergar will achieve as a race. He has no real plans to expand beyond the mountain range. The mountain range. Excuse me. Or grow the race once dominion over the mountains has been attained. Instead, his ideas remain inward, preferring instead to pursue growth of his own wealth and power. His goals serve largely. Let's see. His goals serve himself more than anything, and his ability to gain the most power and gain the most influence over the dark magics, perhaps even one day transcending his own mortal life to become a ruler of one of the realms beyond the mortal. So it's like, that's what his goals are. Like, that's what I imagine with this king. Like, he rules his people, but they're really just a tool for him to sort of expand dominion within the mountains. But really, even that's as a way to obtain whatever resources he may need, whether it's lost and forgotten resources from the dwarves or his own newly harvested resources, in order to understand and grow in his own magical strength. Because his idea, like what I imagine with him, is he doesn't care about the mortal realm. As a twisted user of dark magics, as like the Duergar are, his concern is more about trying to build his own power enough that he may transcend mortality and become, some sort of being of influence within an ethereal plane, is almost more what he's after. That's kind of what I envision for him. So it's like, for him, he could be convinced even possibly to betray his own people. He basically rules and leads and takes care of his people only because they're a resource to help him, identify more planar tears and rifts within the mountains, to find these places where magic can be harvested, or find dwarven treasures that may include enchanted items that might serve him. That's kind of what his goal is. And then additionally, let's just go ahead and mention here, Oromik does not care about the existence of the giants, the drow, or even Eodris, who is our dragon that we've established in past streams. The dragon that holds dominion over the plains. Not plains as in like ethereal plane, but plain as in like grasslands, right? So we've got our dragon that's over here. So, or even Eodris and his Leonin peoples. They are simply distractions that hold no influence over his heart's desire to become one of the most powerfully magical beings to exist. He fights off the drow as they encroach upon his territory, but has no interest in chasing them further than the entrances to his mountain tunnels. Boom, right there. Just establish that there. He doesn't really care. He's not interested in them. They're a distraction. They're flies to be swatted and ignored. He doesn't care about them. They don't have any bearing. He's got dominion over the mountains. As long as he holds that dominion, he doesn't care. He's not like our drow people that want to expand their influence within the mortal plane. He doesn't care. Hello, kitty. How are you doing? There's my cat. There's her little tail there. She's come to get in the way. I know. I'm going to go ahead and sit on the lap. That's fine. That's a sweet kitty. I'd appreciate if you actually lay on my lap rather than sit here and stare intently out the window as if you are about to jump and smack me in the face with your tail as you chase after a bird that's on the bird feeder out there. Yeah, I know you. I know that's what you're doing. Every day. Multiple times every day with this. Okay, so then the only other thing to think about is role-playing notes here. Jot down a few ideas really quickly. Honestly, because of who this guy is, because of who this guy is, I actually don't imagine him having all that dynamic of a personality. And that's kind of the point of him. He's not a very dynamic person. His focus is driven inward. He doesn't care about anyone. There's not really anything particularly interesting about him because he doesn't present anything interesting. He's just trying to do his own thing. If players come to try and strike a deal with him, he'll be bored and listen to them. And if he likes, like, if he sees value in what they offer him, he'll be like, okay, great, whatever, sounds good. And if it doesn't, he'll be like, just leave or else we'll kill you, you know? Or even maybe just, like, imprison them, kill them. I don't care. I'm not interested. Like, that's his attitude. There's nothing there. There she goes. There she goes. Told you. Told you. Every time. Every time. So his accent, standard dwarven brand of like Irish slash Scottish slash Welsh accent. Just that's what it is, you know, that weird dialect that doesn't really fit any of those but kind of fits all of them, right? As if the person who decided that that's what their accent should be didn't really understand the differences there and just kind of bounces between any of them. Yeah, that's what we're looking for here. Just your generic dwarven accent. Just make him Gimli. Call it good. His alignment. So this guy's alignment, I'm thinking he's kind of a neutral evil. Let's see here. He has dark intentions and will do whatever he feels is best for achieving them. He doesn't pursue chaos or conflict, but isn't afraid to employ them if they would be helpful. So it's not like he's not chaotic, right? Where he's going out of his way to be as contrarian and conflict causing as possible. It's more like, you know, he's got his goals and he'll do what he needs to do. He's not irrational, but he will rationally choose to do something chaotic and violent and aggressive or whatever when it seems like it's the most expected or the most expedited route to get to whatever he's trying to achieve. So his nature here, all I'm going to say here is the doings of anyone other than his Duergar subjects as their actions pertain to his personal goals. Oops. Let's see. The doings of anyone other than his Duergar subjects as their actions pertain to his do not interest him. If players strike deals, let's see. If players try to negotiate, he'll listen, but unless there is an obvious benefit to him, he will brush off any diplomacy. He'll brush off any I think that's actually, we can just leave it as that, diplomacy. Any diplomacy. He doesn't hate outsiders, but finds them very uninteresting and completely expendable. So that's the other thing too. If he sees an opportunity to put the players in harm's way, he'll do that. He's got no problem with that. He's like, all right, well, we'll go ahead and let them take out whatever Balrog nonsensical monster exists deep within the mountains. It's, you know, like, oh, we'll let them deal with it. Like, he's like, sure, whatever, you guys can get killed. That works for me. And so that's just kind of his attitude. He's just kind of bored by things that aren't directly him gaining more power. And I think with that, that kind of gives us all we need for him, honestly. He's kind of a boring and bland leader, but I honestly think that's okay to have in a campaign. Not every leader needs to be, you know, the super mega ultra charismatic genius. Sometimes it serves to just have a leader that's very uninteresting, you know, and the players still have to deal with him. Like, that in and of itself can be a character trait, as long as that's not what you do for every single big bad or whatever. So yeah, I think that's good. And if we look at our time, that's just about perfect, because we got 4 minutes until the end of the writing stream here. So I think that's a good place to call it our writing stream for the day. Yeah, thank you to everyone who stopped by. I do have pretty immediately after this, I'm going to take probably about a 15-minute break like I usually do, but immediately after this I do have my gaming stream where I'm going to be continuing my playthrough of Mass Effect 2. So if you want to hang out and watch me play that, then by all means stick around. I'll be back, like I say, in probably about 15 minutes. If not, that's totally fine. I know there's a lot of people that come here because they like to see the writing and the homebrew and stuff like that, but have no interest in watching me game, and I'm not offended by that. That's totally fine. So whichever you choose, though, thank you again for stopping by. And if you're watching the VOD after the fact, thank you for supporting me that way too. Like I say, you know, I don't expect participation from anyone who watches my stuff, whether it's live or after the fact. Just knowing that you guys find interest in this and like to listen to what I'm doing is flattering as it is to me, and I appreciate that. So I do. My schedule is on my Twitch channel. You can see my schedule there. No streams tomorrow. Tomorrow, Wednesdays are my heavy work days, at least right now. So as it stands right now, there's no streaming on Wednesdays, but we will be back with writing on Thursday and Friday of this week. Possibly Saturday, but possibly not. I don't know. Saturdays are always a toss-up. So maybe streaming then, but maybe not. No promises. But yes, if you want to see more writing, stop by again, same time on Thursday. I'll be here. Unless something else pops up, but I don't foresee it, knock on wood. Yeah, other than that, one other thing, I do have a Discord at this point in time. So, if you are interested in continuing to share ideas and whatnot for homebrew stuff, I have a Discord that includes all kinds of different channels that I tried to put up there for people to share their homebrew ideas and stuff that they're working on. If you want to chit-chat about that kind of stuff, feel free to join that. You just got to get yourself verified. We'll verify you and get you involved in chatting away with that community. It's a small but growing community. Like I say, people primarily interested in sharing homebrew ideas, but if you want to talk about video games or anything at all, really, it's just kind of cool to be having a community. So there's that resource there as well if that interests you. But yeah, I think that's all. I think that's all of the self-promotion. I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at actually like plugging my own stuff and self-promoting. It's something that I don't do inherently, and so it's been taking some work for me to get used to. But I'm trying, dang it, I'm trying to get better at this whole streaming thing. But yeah, I think that's all I got. So again, thank you so much to everyone who stopped by. I appreciate all of you. You guys means a lot to me that you're here and you know, that you enjoy what I'm doing. I'm glad I can provide something of interest to you guys. And yeah, you're cool people. I'm excited to see you next time, be that in 15 minutes when I'm gaming or the next time you stop by for the writing stream. Either way, I appreciate you. Can't wait to see you again. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Okay, I'm going to end the stream for a little bit, and then I'll be back. And where's the button? There it is. End the stream. All right, see you soon.